Well, a big g'day from Down Under and welcome to week 7 of the Zwift Racing League WTRL for the APAC region. I'm Kate Bates, joined tonight by the whiteboard Zwift Queen Anna Russel. Anna, we're set for an exciting night tonight. Have you got your whiteboard out ready? Have you got all the strategies on there?
I have done a bit of whiteboarding today. I've had a few course recce's, and we're in for an exciting night. This is going to be a good one. It's a pretty sort of interesting course that has thrown up. I've seen a lot of different strategies, so I don't know how it's going to play out tonight. It's sort of everything's up in the air.
Well, it's 47k around the Petite Bouc in Zwifty, France. And Anna, it's going to be a cracker, but let's take a look at the standings so far to get a bit of an idea what's happening in the women's race, because we will head down to them first. So for the Women's APAC Division 1A, at the top of the table, 119 points and in a fairly clear lead there. AHDRL, Ace of Cakes, Aero Flyers, 6 points adrift on 113. Zunderstruck, 107 points in third. BRT Devil Kittens, 102 points in fourth. I would say there's a tight race for the top of the podium there, and another quite tight race for the third there. In fifth spot, we've got AHDRL Bombshells on 88 points. AHDRL, which is, of course, Australian Hump Day Ride Ladies, Fluffy Buns on 81 points. BRT Hellfire Kittens on 76. Cryogen Valletta on 53, and Empower are there, but they are yet to open their scoring yet. So let's take a look at the Division C, Anna.
It's very tight at the top. We can see there TBR Smile On, only 1 point ahead of AHDRL. We Ate the Cake, who are only 1 point ahead of BRT Fiery Kitten. So a massive battle on their hands in that top three in the C category. Then we've got fourth place a bit further back with AHDRL Caffeines, then the AHDRL Comets, then the Spin Mafia and the Cruzettes. So a big AHDRL standing here. Then Evo in 8th, CMA Queen Bees in 9th, and finishing off with the herd of Echidnas, 66 points.
Well, it is a tight race at the top of a lot of those tables, and I think that we're in week 7, but we're looking forward to a couple of exciting weeks to come. What else is exciting coming up is, of course, the first ever UCI World Esports Championships. But before that, we have the Zwift Nations Challenge, which is kind of a chance, Anna, for every man and his dog to get out there and support their nation in a virtual national jersey. So they will be heading out on the 5th and 6th of December. It's about 11 a.m. Sydney time, I believe, on the Saturday and the Sunday. They'll be cruising the 50 kilometres on the figure 8 reverse lap in Watopia. And the first 10%, well, they'll be discounted. The last 10%, they'll be discounted. But all of those folks in the middle, and there's a lot of people who think they're not important when they finish in the middle, this is their time to shine, they will be eligible to count towards the nation's total. So it'll be top 22 countries by Zwift subscribers who are out there. So delightfully, Australia and New Zealand are welcome. They've got 2 events each, so everyone needs to just take a look at their Zwift event and make sure that they sign up to the country that they are actually registered for in Zwift. So let's take a bit of a look at the video. It's pretty exciting times in the esports world to have a World Championships. So I hope everybody gets on board and supports the Zwift Nations Challenge. So you can head over to Zwift.com or WTRL.racing to find out a little bit more information. Let's take a look at the countries that are involved. Anna, of course, Australia and New Zealand are bookending that list, but who else have we got there?
Yeah, New Zealand just scraped in. I'm stoked to see that. We've also got the likes of France, Norway, Sweden. You can see Italy, South Africa, the UK, of course, the United States. That'll have a huge showing. Colombia, they'll love that course that finishes up the volcano KOM. Japan, Canada, Ireland. I mean, there's so many. And then a big chunk called the rest of the world. So if your country isn't there, just go jump in the rest of the world and wear that little jersey.
Well, it's kind of good to know that everybody belongs somewhere, right? So if you don't have a nation that's on that list, you'll go into the rest of the world, and maybe next year your country will be represented in that top 22. All right, we'll head down to the racing for week 7 here. Of course, it's another scratch race. We've been alternating team time trials with scratch races. The women are out on course, and so far we've had a little bit of dominance kind of emerging over the weeks. Do you think that some of those riders from Ace of Cakes, in particular, and the Aeroflyers will have a bit of a target on their back?
Yeah, so what came out last week in the team time trial was quite interesting because the Aero Flyers, who have usually been placing third to Z Sun, who are in second, actually beat them. So they've moved up quite a bit. And it looks as though that BRT as well is very, very close to Z Sun and could overtake them on the podium. I think AHDRL, they're a bit too far ahead now and a bit too dominant for the other teams to catch. But we've got a real battle between second, third, and fourth. So watch for the BRT riders really targeting the Z Sun riders, and then likewise the Z Sun really targeting the Aero riders. So a lot of sort of battles within battles as we see the riders out on course, and a lot of Tron bikes, which I am surprised about. This course, to be honest, pretty flat, and you'd be wanting to look at the disc wheel setup, I think, but it does have one significant climb, which is quite similar to the Volcano KOM or Box Hill on the London World. So maybe those ones on the Tron bike, they really think that they're going to push that climb tonight.
Yeah, I think that's interesting how much bike choice goes into it. My sentiment, Anna, is that if you've got the Tron bike, you kind of always use the Tron bike, but there's a lot more nuance to it, isn't there?
Yeah, so the Tron bike, you've ridden that 50,000 meters elevation on Zwift, you've unlocked it, it's really nice and shiny, you can change all the colors on it to match your team kit. So aesthetically, it's very pleasing. But today, I probably wouldn't have picked that. I can see some Aero riders there and their green and gold kits. A few of them have got the disc wheels, because I do think, and we saw that play out in the women's Prem division earlier today, is that it really will probably finish in a sprint. So those disc wheel bikes will by far be superior against the Tron in a sprint situation.
It is a really interesting dynamic. You talked about the different teams kind of targeting and focusing on the other teams. One rider who I have absolutely loved thrive through this series is Angela McRae, and she's in the BRT Hellfire Kittens. I'm just counting down the list. They're only in 6, but I think that's because they have a smaller team out there. And so when you talk about aggregate points, they're not able to earn as many points and push themselves up the ranking. But a rider like Ange McRae could really throw the cat amongst the pigeons out there, because each week she's kind of been getting better. How much do you think, Anna? Because bearing in mind that you also race, so you take a lot of these races and kind of learn from the tactics of them, but you also have that whiteboard, of course, and an interest in it yourself. I mean, how much do you think one rider can really affect the overall tactics when it does come back down to that team classification?
It's an interesting one. I get a bit nervous with how much I give away, because I've realized I think our competitors over in the Americas East Division may be listening to what I'm saying, because I've seen a few a few little preemptive things on what our team was about. But, it does really, if you've got a really dominant rider, how are you going to play it today? Because there are a lot of intermediary points on offer. You don't have points on the climb. So today there's some sprint points. There's also the Aqueduct QOM climb points, but it's such a short climb, I'd almost treat it as a sprint. So if you've got a rider who, has the power, has that 15-second power, you'd almost send them off the front and get them to gather all those intermediate sprint points. and then say, don't worry about the climb, you can back off then. But it is an interesting question. It's going to be different team dynamics. The other thing we'll see at the first sprint stage today, whether people go for points, is that's where we saw some massive breaks in the Prem Division races earlier today. So people were going for the sprints, and either they kept up that pace and just pushed it and dropped riders, or they had a teammate do a counter attack, and that's where it just detonated the field, and it was huge explosions, and you were left with 14 riders up the front.
Well, that's pretty old school tactic, the old 1-2 through an intermediate sprint. They've got 5 opportunities to do that. You would mention points, so they get 3-2-1 points for the first 3 riders across the line today. That has changed a bit throughout the series. Sometimes we've had that 5 deep. Good question on socials, Patrick. Do you think the S-Bens are a danger point? They certainly are. If it's in real life, I think the S-Bens, if anybody even hesitates for a moment, it's a very good chance to attack. What's your thoughts on that, Anna?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I sent the course map off to my team today, I circled that area, and actually it's called on this course Luzentestine, which is the intestines. So it's a really wriggly...
the guts of the course.
The guts of the course. And we actually saw this morning Team Heino in the women's race really put in an attack there, and I wanted to see if they could get away, because if you're left napping on that part, you kind of get out of sight, out of mind. Someone can get around a couple of corners and they're gone. There's also rollers through those cornery parts, so definitely a danger point. What was interesting, though, is Heino just did not get away. They got maybe 2 seconds, and then people sort of cottoned on and caught up. So if you can catch people napping, yes. If the group is really small, maybe 5 or 6 riders, yes, because there's not going to be a huge draft behind. But definitely, for sure, Patrick, it is a danger point on tonight's race.
I actually love that people that are watching the broadcast who may be Zwift warriors themselves and experienced a bit get to watch this racing and have a really intrinsic understanding of how it may work. It's so different to sitting back and watching the Tour de France and thinking what a beautiful chateau, but not really understanding the course. That is very limited to the teams themselves or to locals. And so I actually think that's a really cool and unique thing about the Zwift world. Now, I think what we're seeing here from Aero, there's a bit of a difference, Anna, between pushing to the front and opening gaps and, hurting the legs a bit versus an attack. And they do need to be really careful not to waste any energy by unnecessarily riding on the front too much, right? So it's 47K. They're clipping along at over 45K an hour at the moment. I mean, it is flat, but they're moving pretty quick. I've got to say, from my perspective, I don't see why they'd even be pushing the pace this much, because it's not going to be doing a huge amount of damage to the people sitting in the draft. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, we're only sort of halfway through this little portion before we get to that first sprint, so I'm not sure. And this is the second time I've seen Clark from Aero really moving off the front. And you're right, there's not much of a reason to do that. And you look at the old hands at this. I can see Willock's in there. I just had a little bit of a look at McKay, I think it is. They're all sort of, the AHDR riders from Ace of Cakes. They're just hiding away in the pack. So we did see a couple of riders get dropped from this group just before. I think they're about 20 seconds back now. So they are moving really fast, and I'm not sure if Aero thinks that they'll be able to drop more riders off. But I think you're right there, Katie. Stay in the pack. Just, cruise this part. You can see the sprint will be coming up in a few kilometres, and, make your way near the front there. But, yeah, no reason to push at the moment. No way.
I mean, that's the thing in the Zwift world. There is no headwind or tailwind. So that's a big differentiator. I mean, there you go. Zwift technicians, there's something to throw in the mix for the riders, because that could make a bit of a difference. But generally, this is a much bigger bunch than we've seen on any course. The last course that they raced on in this format was the Everything Bagel around New York City. That's one of the nastiest, craziest courses out there. And they were in 1s and 2s kind of within the first 10K. So at the 10K mark, 37K left to go. It's a very big bunch, the biggest that we've seen yet. So this gives a bit of an indication that it's going to be quite a different flavoured race than any we've seen so far. We're on week 7 now. So, yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting, I think, how the riders assume it may go versus what's actually playing out, because this is a new scenario for them.
Yeah, and we're sort of watching EBIT here, 164 watts. This is cruising, they're at a 0% grade. They're not going downhill. So this is they're riding at 46k an hour, but they're not pushing it that hard. And, I've got to say, I rode that New York course. It was absolutely horrible. Like, I got to say, that climb hitting in the first 5k, it was,
I think you're being really politically correct. That's not the word I used.
No, there were different words, but I gotta say, it's we had one teammate throwing up at the finish and one bursting into tears. So that tells you how hard that course was. But this one, it's just that little climb that's going to be a bit hard. But again, you saw this morning the riders. They could easily get caught on the downhill. So that's why I said today's course is a bit interesting. You're just not sure what's going to happen. If I'm a team manager of a team out here, say Aero, I'd be saying go for as many points as you can. It's only 3 deep on those intermediary sprints, and then just do those 1-2 punches after that. Get away, break up the field. You don't want a pack like this coming into the finish because it's just too many people. You could barely get points, if you just spat out the back with some of the really top class sprinters.
Well, and it's also a point to consider that if a devil kitten, for example, say Shelby, because we've seen her have some seriously impressive moves over the week, especially in Richmond. I was like a cheerleader for her in Richmond. She rode unbelievably well. But they're down on 4th overall. If Shelby had a bit of a flyer, there's not really any reason for an Ace of Cakes or a Zunderstruck to chase her unless, and here's the big unless, it comes a bit down to ego. What do you reckon, Anna? Because when I see someone attack, in that moment, the strategy often goes a bit out the window. Whether or not they're a real danger kind of goes out the window because you get that taste, you get a sniff for it, I mean, how much do you think these riders are organized enough and composed enough to be saying, no, we're not going to chase that, there's just no need, versus we want to win, we can do this?
Yeah, so I think that's such a good point. I think you'll have the likes of Danette Shaw from Zunderstruck, who did so well in New York, 740 watt, 15-second power. She'll just sit in the pack. She won't have any of that ego. But the cool thing about this series, because we're 7 races deep now, is that, you can see the sprint coming up here. I'll come back to that point, but we'll have a look here. We've got Hurst leading it out from AHDRL, and it looks like a BRT rider coming through. Ryan, I did look at her watts before. She's got amazing sprint capacity, and she's got that aero helmet, but she's just been passed now by Shaw, who I was just mentioning. So she's got the truck, so she is obviously going for some points today. Great setup. Looks like she may just take it. Yes, she takes it on the line, and she has got that very fast setup, so kudos to her for picking the right bike as well.
Oh, great ride from Danette Shaw. Kudos to Dana Davidson as well. We know she's got a pretty good kick on her, so not too surprising to see her up there as well. No real gaps have opened up. They are on the cobbles, so they do need to keep pushing hard. Here's Ange McRae. I honestly, every time I see her sneaking up the front, I think she's a bit of a dark horse. She just gets better and better every week. So we've had the first provisional sprint. We'll take a look at the replay here. And Ryan opened it up, dropping the power up. She had the aero power up. She's got the aero helmet on, but that didn't compare to the acceleration of Shaw using the truck power up there. But, well, she held on by quite a lot. And Ryan, she did hold on for second, but Davidson snuck in there for third. Let's talk about the power ups for a second, Anna, because we don't see those in the team's time trial, but they are back now in the scratch race. Every time they go through one of those sprints, they do get a new power-up. In a flat-out sprint, it's a bit of a debate about which one is of the most value. What do you reckon? Because I think that a well-timed feather can be very good on an acceleration, but a good draft one can allow you to move up.
Yeah, well, just to say, there is a little bit of a split here. We can see the AHDR riders and a couple of Z Sun with a few Aero just only about 4 seconds back. There was a Z Sun rider really pushing pace at the front as well at about 4.5 watts a kg when we last saw. They're losing time now. There was 3 seconds. It's gone up to 5. So let's see what happens here if they can. I think this front group is pretty motivated now to stay away. You can see Clark here again, who's been on the front a lot, the third, fourth time she's been on the front, and that was a big push. 5.5 watts a kg now coming from Kath McKay, and they're just starting the aqueduct QON. So this is the one I said is more like a sprint. It's very short, not that steep. You can see they're about 3-4%, but it doesn't get much higher than that. And this is going to be an all-out sprint to the line. Another Z Sun rider here. They are definitely going for these points, and they are very close behind BRT. So you can see the two there, BRT and Z Sun, right at the top here going for it. And it looks as though Z Sun rider on that green Tron may come through, but Preston here from BRT putting in a last surge, 7.6, 8.4 watts per kg. She will take it out over the Z Sun rider with Kath McKay on that pink Tron, looking like she may have come through in third, or it could have been Clark there as well from Aero.
I'm expecting that was a pretty well raced sprint, but Anna, I'm expecting that they do sit up and ease off the power a bit in the middle. We saw some quite significant splits after that first pavé sprint, but considering how quickly after the aqueduct sprint was, it is, smart to think that perhaps they were just continuing the pace to get to that. This is a replay. Preston, she did a brilliant job. Hans Joosten from Z Sun, she opened it up. I mean, she's in that front group. We haven't seen a lot of her over the weeks, but she's done a very, very good job there. Clearly has some good legs today. In all of the other weeks, Anna, we've noticed pretty early on in the race who's got good legs and who hasn't. It's been very rare that we've seen somebody sit back and come out with good legs that we didn't expect. So let's take a look at the updated bonus points. We've had 2 so far. Danette Shaw, she is on 3 points with Erin Preston. They won a sprint each. Shaw won that pavé, and Preston was first over the aqueduct. Dana Davidson sitting on 2 points. Hans Joosten on 2 points. She opened up the pace pretty well on the aqueduct. Kath McKay on 1, Sarah Ryan on 1. So we've had 2 sprints, and all of them have had different riders. Interesting to note, Dana Davidson got the 2 points in the most passive way. Both Shaw, Preston, Hans Joosten, and Ryan had to work pretty hard to open up that point count. So that's an interesting one, because I don't think Davidson has used a lot of energy there. She's just kind of followed a couple of wheels to get in that position. Yeah. This is a much smaller front bunch. It's still pretty big.
Yeah, it is. I think what's interesting to see there is the Z Sun riders quite high up because they know that BRT could catch them. So they're only 5 points ahead in the league. So there's a nice little battle happening here between Z Sun and BRT, and we're seeing that play out just in these intermediary sprint points. So that's perhaps why AHDRL Ace of Cakes isn't, making such a big showing here, because they're so far ahead. I think they're just waiting for that climb and just seeing how these little battles play out behind them. One thing I do want to point out, though, is Sarah Ryan, who came through across one of those sprints with that blue Aero helmet. So I hadn't seen that Aero helmet in game before, but I think she actually is doing the Triathlon Academy. So I think that's an unlock when you finish the Tri Academy. So she's been training pretty hard. I've done a few of those workouts myself. So I think you have to do around 6 bike workouts and 5 run workouts or something, and a couple of races. So yep, that's definitely the Triathlon Academy helmet. So I'd watch out for her. She could be quite good on that climb, because a lot of them are extended sort of 5-minute efforts in those training, and she's had to have done an individual time trial as a race as well. So good to see that helmet out. I'm just going to look at that chase pack that Murphy there from AHDR. She's back there. A couple of Aero riders as well, and they're 20 seconds back now. So unfortunately, I think that they've probably missed it. Like I said, those sprints have really detonated this field.
Yeah, 20 seconds is quite a big gap. I mean, of course, they can't see the bunch ahead, even on the map in the top right of screen. But more than that, if you get dropped by 20 seconds in Zwift, it's not by accident. There's certainly usually a bit of a power differential, and so that is often very hard to bring back. But sometimes you kind of get caught unawares, and every now and again we'll surprisingly see a rider that is kind of stuck back in that second group, and it is hard to chase back because one rider can't do that on their own, and perhaps for team purposes it's not the right thing to do for that. This is a lovely drone shot, isn't it? Look at that wine country.
It's
Very
beautiful. Have you
beautiful
spent much
through
time in France,
France,
Katie?
isn't it? Yeah, we used to have quite a lot of races through France, actually. I mean, it's, as anybody knows from watching the Tour de France, it's very beautiful, but it's very tough racing terrain. So often these shots are a lot more beautiful than what you're seeing when you're on the bike and
Yeah,
you
I
kind of
raced for
sweating
a
through your eyeballs.
yeah. I raced for a triathlon team in Toulon, so I spent a bit of time in the Alps. Haven't gone cycling around too much of the other areas, but absolutely stunning. Like you said, the climbs are a bit tricky, and it was a bit hard in the heat of summer. I mean, but beautiful place to go riding. The roads are just amazing, and you don't feel like you're going to get run off by cars like you do here in New Zealand.
No, that's delightful. And the Kiwis actually have a big history of having a good base. They used to have a base in France, the Kiwi women's road cycling team. So
Yeah, so
they were always pretty well performing. Actually, I mean, you've had some very, very big results from on the Kiwi front in the world cycling standard. So we've got another intermediate sprint coming up here. Ryan on the move. She has been super aggressive. This is a similar move to the first one. This is the balloon sprint reverse that we're heading into now. She's on a mission.
two
But
BRT.
Preston, my goodness, look at that acceleration. She used a power up, but that was really impressive from
That was
Preston.
amazing. And I
I
think
mean,
like I was
Davidson
talking about.
snuck into third there as well, Anna.
Yeah, Davidson's having a great one. I think this is just absolutely showing the internal battles. I think you saw the last sprint, Z Sun was out the front, and now BRT is. So I think BRT has got their eyes on Z Sun, and that's who they want to be beating. And they've done that here with a 1-2. Amazing riding from Preston and Ryan for that balloon sprint intermediary.
So the BRT, they're sitting in fourth, so they're obviously pretty motivated to go out there and kind of stick the effort in and make a bit of an attack. Ryan, we haven't seen a huge amount from her in the last couple of weeks. And look, maybe she has, as you were saying, timed her effort with that Tri Academy, and she's really coming into form. So let's take a look at those bonus points. Erin Preston on 6 points, well earned from her. The Devil Kittens, they're sitting in fourth, but she's leading the way to try and move them up. Dana Davidson, quite a passive effort to be on 3 points. Jeanette Shaw also on 3. Sarah Ryan, another Devil Kitten, on 3. Hans Yosten on 2, and Kath McKay sitting on 1. The Devil Kittens and Zunderstruck, that's the story of the day, isn't it? I mean, so far they have absolutely shown to be very protective of their position on the table, and they're certainly, attacking it in every way they can. But there
Yeah, and I
are a
think
lot
I'll
of
tell you. Yeah, so what I'll tell you right now is the reason we haven't seen Sarah Ryan is she usually races in the EMEA league. She doesn't usually race in APAC. So I think what's happened is she's been a bit of a call up. They've said, you've raced well in that other league. She can race in 2. So they've said, we need to beat or stay ahead of Z Sun. Come and race for us in APAC. So I think she's been a bit of a high profile ring in for the team for tonight's race.
Ooh, I like that. That's very cool. All right, we've got a question here. I'll throw this to you, Anna, about why they're not using the S-Works Venge with the disc wheels. We talked about this a bit earlier, and I thought that general sentiment is that the Tron bike is always your quickest option no matter what. But you definitely don't agree with that, do you, Anna?
No, so this course is really hard to pick a bike for because it depends on how the race unfolds. So to answer your question, David, The reason I'm not seeing some disc wheels, in my opinion, is because people think that the climb is going to be decisive. So if the climb is decisive, you're probably going to ride a Specialized Venge with maybe some Zip 454s because there we go. Thanks, Niels. You've kind of answered my question. Is I think you'll be riding a sort of quick wheel set like a 454, which will go well in a sprint, but it will go better in a climb. I'm interested by the Tron bikes. I don't know if there's any DSs that are watching as to why they've picked Tron bikes for their team. Because I think if you weren't going to go for the sort of more climbing setup, then I'd definitely be going a disc wheel because you'll lose a bit on the climb, but you'll gain it on the downhill. And then if there's a sprint finish, you're going to have a huge advantage. But, we mentioned before as well, Katie, we sort of never got to answering it, which power up is better for a sprint. Now, you'd say aero power up for sure, but what I saw today, and it actually changed my opinion a little bit, is if you get a feather, if you use that in the right way, which is do a huge acceleration straight off the bat with a feather, it actually has a huge benefit. I didn't know that. So I thought it was only really good for climbs or any kind of incline, but no, you can actually use it to get a bit of a jump on your competition because it'll push your watts per kg really, really high. So a little bit of a tip out there. I didn't know that one.
Yeah, I've seen that happen in real life very effectively. Obviously, we don't have power-ups, but you can very often see the lighter riders, and I'll say, for the men, say Caleb Ewan or Mark Cavendish are great examples. They're kind of pocket rockets, and their acceleration is second to none. And that is a lot because of their weight, because they're a lot lighter than some of the heavier sprinters. But if it's a long sprint and they go long, a lot of the heavier sprinters manage to muscle it out to produce higher power over a longer sprint to get to that finish line quicker. If you translate that into the Zwift world and you're the heaviest sprinter with who can muscle it out over a long sprint, and then you have that feather power up, I think that's almost an unbeatable combination. And I don't actually think that the lighter weight sprinters have anything that offers them that same advantage than the heavier weight sprinters.
Yeah, you're totally right. So it's personally, I would definitely still be wanting an aero at the finish. I've just seen someone write why they may be riding all the Trons, which I didn't think about. So thanks for that, Stephen, over on Facebook, is that they probably don't have the right number of drops to be purchasing the disc wheels. So I kind of forgot that actually to get the disc wheels and the Specialized S-Works Venge, you sort of need to be, level 30 plus or level 35 plus. So with the Tron, you don't actually need to be a certain level. You just need to have ridden 50,000 meters. So maybe that's sort of why we see so many Trons here. And I think we'd see that if we went and saw what these level of Zwift riders are. We do see them here now entering this area that we talked about before called Les Intestines. I'll just use a bit of my French pronunciation. And I just love saying that word. And you can see already the twists and turns are starting. And, Katie, I'm interested in the real world when you're cycling. What do you do in courses like this? Would you have had a team that would attack or would you sit in? Because I think this is where you get quite close to what it would be like in real life.
Yeah, this is the kind of section on a course where it's a similar dynamic to if it's quite a strong wind. And that is you get your entire team to the front and you rotate amongst yourselves, essentially forming an echelon at the front just with your team, where everybody else has to hang on. Because if you find the right line through these S-bends, you can really pick up a lot of speed and it becomes very hard for the other riders just hanging on the back. It's almost like an elastic band effect. And that's not too dissimilar in the Zwift world. You don't have the same, obviously we've talked about not having wind, but you don't quite have that same effect of choosing your line on the road. But what you definitely do have is the speed up and slow down effect of going around any corners. And I think teams can really maximize that. And a sneaky way to do it, if you think about, like driving a car, you do the opposite. Instead of slowing down into these little corners, you actually accelerate into them because there will be some people who back off the power just a tiny bit as they go around. Those tiny microseconds I mean, to quote Dave Brailsford in the old marginal gains, that's where it can really make a big effect.
Yeah, I've got to tell you now, I did my first crit race on the weekend, an in real life crit race. This triathlete actually went out and did a
Woo!
cycle race. And
All right, I'd
I
like
got
to
told, I
hear
was
how
like,
this went.
I made the front group and then got told at the end that I was the worst cornerer they had ever seen. So I have a little
Okay,
bit of
all
power
right.
and zero skill. I stayed upright on the bike, but these corners are giving me a bit of the cold sweats as to how I felt over the weekend.
Well, I mean, but you bring that up. That's a really interesting consideration because we can't disassociate the psychological versus the physiological. And when you're looking at the screen, is there some part of you that is seeing the bends and is kind of reacting in the same way that you would if you were riding on the bends? I mean, it's a really interesting argument. The men are out on course, so we'll jump over and take a look at what's happening over there. The women 24.4 kilometres into their 47-kilometre race. It's quite a long race for them today. Doris Ma doing a brilliant job there for the Devil Kittens. So we're going to head over to the men's. And we've got, wow, look at this, Anna. This is your bloke, Krasicki. What's he doing off the back there?
What has happened? So something's happened there. He is fighting his way back up. He was pushing those huge watts. He's burned a lot of batches to get back on. Who knows? I know he's had some technicals before. Maybe he just had a little power dropout, or maybe started. I know it's like 3 a.m. for him, so maybe got a little bit distracted or a bit tired drinking his coffee or something, and he dropped off. But he's back in that main pack, and a much bigger pack than we've seen in the women's field. We're seeing someone just pushing off the front here. Not quite sure why they'd be going off the front this early on. Like we've said before, way better to just stick with the pack that's rolling through at around 50k an hour. We'll see who this rider is. I do. It looks like a ZWC rider potentially. Oh, there's a lot of riders to get through. There we go, a BRT rider, Hysiax. I haven't seen them before, but I do actually want to mention, Katie, we've got a bit of drama in the men's field.
Oh, I love a bit. Are we talking like Days of Our Lives, or are we talking like Bold and the Beautiful? I mean, what are we talking here?
Oh, it's like that. So we've got Relentless. Relentless has tried to poach one of the best ZWC members, apparently. And now they've actually taken rider Zaki Yama from World Elite Zwifters, who apparently was a very important member of that team, now riding for Relentless. So there's a little bit of poaching happening in this APAC lead. So interesting stuff. I'm loving it. I love the drama.
Oh, I like that too. I mean, I think this is serious business. We sit here and we commentate on all of these different leagues, but these are humans with real motivation, just like us, and it is serious business. We had a bit of a flashback to see Grasicki being dropped. We're back up to speed now. Thankfully, they are all back together because we were quite distressed when he had a technical dropout a couple of weeks ago. Let's just take a quick look at the standings so we can unpack the motivations that might be happening out there today. For Div 1 on the top of the table, Team ZWC Attack on 116, Relentless 2 points adrift on 114, DPAC P109, very tight amongst those top three. Aero Masters in fourth on 88, Evo Savages on 84, Wes number 283, Team ZWC Blast on 81, another tight cluster there from 4th to 8th. WTRL Pioneers on 69, Phoenix Cycling Collective 61, TBR 54, Tooth on 59 points. That's the APAC Div 1. The Div 2, Anna, the Division B, pardon me.
We've got TBR 50T on 115, just ahead of Aero Force on 112, Evo Barbarians a bit further back on 105, Cryogen 91, ZHQ Ravens on 87, AHDR Both Eyes on 84, Dirty Sprockets on 84 as well. It's a good little battle. Vision APAC on 79, Z Sundries 66, rounded out with MRRB in 58.
And in the C, we've got AHDR Chances on 115, TBR 46T on 111, so only 4 points there. TT1 Carbos 107. They are all still in contention. Cryogen LT'd on 100. AHDR Choppers 96, TBR 47T on 79. Cryogen Alto de Latras on 78. Again, another tight cluster there. MRRC on 75 in 8th. In 9th, we've got AHDR Chargers on 66 points. And in 10th, Cryogen Mount Hotham on 52 points. So fairly similar across all the leagues, Anna. It's fairly tight at the top. It's also very tight for 3rd and 4th place. Interesting little move here by Hoare. What I have come to learn very much, especially doing what are meant to be a fairly civilized bunch rides as opposed to races on Zwift, is sometimes, I'm going to say, you can have an accidental attack where you're not comfortable with your position mid-pack and you put in a bit of an acceleration and all of a sudden you find your avatar shooting off the front of the bunch without really meaning to. When you find yourself in that position, you've got to make a choice. Do you keep going with it, or do you take a moment's opportunity to recover because you've kind of over done the effort? It's something that's pretty unique to Zwift because you don't accidentally attack IRL, but it does happen in Zwift, doesn't it?
Yeah, what I've noticed with these races more and more is you've got to be focused, so focused for the entire race because there's so many just little things like that that happen. With this one, with so many sprint points going on, there's just so many attacks. And, I remember racing the New York race, just a little bit of sort of inattention and riders are gone and you just cannot get them back. So it's what's great about this league is there's so many people racing it. But I think sometimes you can get a little bit caught up in looking at a particular rider, like, oh, we want to beat a Z Sun or we want to beat a BRT. And I think you might sort of lose a bit of what you're trying to do in the race, and then you find yourself on the front of the pack or the back of the pack when you don't want to be. And we can see the women's race, they're just hitting this reverse petite QOM. There's no points at the top of this, but I think it will end up being decisive. And you can see all those Trons drift into the back as we see, I think, the Specialized, the bike that I would choose for the ride with Davidson dropping off. What do you think about that, Katie? She's 4 seconds back now.
Yeah, that's a tough one for Davidson. I mean, we know that she's got really good legs when it comes to power and acceleration. I'm very complimentary of her ability to sneak a couple of points without making a huge amount of effort. We can say that based on her heart rate and her power, which are, of course, are the metrics that you can get through either looking on screen when we are on the rider or if you look at Zwift Power. So we know she hasn't been wasting energy. It could be anything, honestly. It could be her taking a drink at an inopportune time. It could be bad legs. It could be a bit of a technical dropout. We won't know until about 5 minutes' time. If in 5 minutes' time she's nowhere to be seen, she's obviously had a bit of an explosion and just bad legs today. But I wouldn't be surprised if she does manage to get back on because for 6%, it is tough. But Davidson is just such a hardy rider, and I've been really impressed by her week in and week out. She's really been improving. So let's give her a bit of the benefit of the doubt. But in saying that, if she doesn't get back on soon, it doesn't really matter what the reason is that she's off the back. Yeah. I mean, it's game
she's
over,
off the
right?
back, yeah. I think it's a bit dangerous for her because she's solo. She's not with a group there to sort of catch up. But one rider I do want to talk about a little bit is this Sarah Ryan. So she's the one with that cool aquamarine helmet, just sitting in second rider here over the top. So she hasn't really ridden in this the APAC League much before, but she's a mum of a 2-year-old. Gotta love the Zwifting mums out there. And she is a cyclist and a runner. I do see she's done a run race. I think that was today maybe. So or yesterday. So great work on her. And she's an ex-rower. And what I know about rowers, they've got some sustained power. And I think this might be my rider to watch today. I think she could come through. She's got the aero helmet. She's prepared to sprint.
Yeah, I like that one. So let's go to the split screen here because of course, the men and women are both out on course. And isn't it interesting? 20 kilometres difference and the difference in bunch size. So we're coming up to one of the sprints for the men for the first sprint here on the pavé. And of course, when the women went over there, we saw a brilliant acceleration by Ryan, the rider we were just talking about. And let's see what happens in the men, because it is an opportunity. There's not a lot of distance between the pavé sprint and then the aqueduct KOM, which is kind of more of a sprint, really. It's not much for KOM. There's not a lot of time between that. And so it's a pretty good tactic for riders to go for one and then keep accelerating through to the other one. But the men do have a much bigger bunch, so the dynamics are a bit different. But if we're looking at Sayer from Cryogen at the moment, his heart rate's pretty up there. I mean, 170, you can't say that's just cruising along. And he's ticking into around the 5 watts per kilo just to move along here. And they're clipping along at nearly 50k an hour. So, Anna, it's pretty clear that they're taking all of these sprints pretty seriously. Power-ups are starting to get dropped and the acceleration is starting to happen.
Yeah, they're coming up very closely to the sprint. You can just see on that map in the top right corner, it's the little green dot there. So they're just going to sort of round this bend, hit some pavers in the little village, and they'll be coming through the sprint, which is pretty short. And I think these guys are starting to get a bit twitchy, sort of it looks like. They just sort of roll around. Some are surfing the wheels, but it's definitely picked up the pace. 500 watts here on the front from one of the Cryogen riders. So that was a big acceleration, and you can see it just getting a little strung out there at the back. I think people are getting nervous. They know that these are the places where riders will get dropped, and unfortunately I'm seeing a lot of, I think it's TFC off the back, all the yellow jerseys, but it's been opened up here by Blackie. It looks like a Jones here from Zed's son, Aero Power Up. He's doing great, 12.5 watts per kg, with Morgan from Wales, a countryman, right behind him on that yellow trombite. Will he catch him on the line? I'm not sure he will. He's coming up really fast. Jones here, but it looks like Morgan has just rolled over him. It came out of the sprint, so she just rolled over his countryman. I don't know how well that's going to go in the WTRL Race of Nations with those two on that sprint.
Well, Morgan from DPAC, he had a really good ride at the last scratch race we had in NYC, Everything Bagel. So not surprising to see him have a good acceleration. But Jones from Zedson, that was a very good move. Morgan kind of snuck over the top there. O'Connell, we also know that he's a bit of a standout rider as well. It's, again, interesting, Anna, to consider the tactics, because ZWC Attack, they've been doing an excellent job, and in New York, they were absolutely sensational. But Relentless is the one that we talk about a lot. I'm going to float something with you. Let's just quickly go over those bonus points. Two Welshmen on top, Ed Morgan with DPAC there taking the 3 points. Dylan Jones from Zed's son taking the 2. Anthony O'Connell, Aero Masters, taking that 1 point in the intermediate sprint. I'll throw it out to you that we talked about a little bit of drama with Relentless and some poaching and trying to get some riders from other teams. At this point in the series, when you're on a team that you don't feel is really representing your abilities, is this where you kind of go on solo attacks and try and go for these sprints, not for the benefit of your team necessarily in the series, but more to kind of put yourself out there on a bit of a talent hunt? You reckon that works, Anna?
Yeah.
Like, hey, everybody, look at me. I've got really good legs. Choose me for next season.
I would love it if the community league was that full on about wanting to get picked for other teams. I mean, there's no money on the line here. This is just pure pride. But we're just coming up to that Aqueduct KOM, sort of like that sprint. We've got a ZWC rider out the front with 2 Relentless, Duffy Jr. here and Wilson, chasing him down as they're opening it up. Looks like Duffy is going through with huge watts with Yama. There's our stolen rider, Yama, coming through. He's obviously a great pickup from the Relentless team. He's just coming in second, but there is another rider, DPAC. That's got to be a photo finish. I have no idea. It looked like it may have been the DPAC rider with that black Aero helmet, just slightly, but that was a amazing finish here as we watched the replay. So we saw it opened up with Duffy on that orange, yellow trombite with another Relentless rider, Yama, just behind him. Then I think if we watch that APAC rider, Evola, I think just at the end there, pushing up 14 watts per kg. I think he might have edged out both. I think potentially Yama got that. Very hard to see. We'll have to see the prims come up on that one. But that was an extremely tight finish with our mate Grosicki there in a clear fourth on that pink Tron. Great job, Grosicki.
It's funny because as opposed to real life racing, I kind of give these guys personalities that may or may not exist. I feel like it's like seeing the face of a radio presenter, Anna. Like it just can ruin everything. So I'm not sure I actually want to meet any of these guys that we're commentating on. We've built them up to be superstars. Brian Duffy Jr. I'm super impressed with him. He has got so much acceleration. And I actually reckon he'd be a really good crit rider based on his physiology. But if somebody tells me he's a triathlete, I'll be bummed out because he'll have to figure out
I think he is a triathlete.
Is he really? Stop it.
I think he is.
Me. All right, well, he'd be a good crit rider. Brian Duffy Jr. and his family, he'd be a good crit rider.
His profile shot is him with an Iron Man t-shirt on. So sorry to say, I think he's a triathlete.
Oh, goodness me. All right, let's go back to the women. They're heading onto the aqueduct for another sprint here. The bunch is pretty small now. How many have we got there? 2, 4, 6, about 15 of them. Good to see Doris Ma there. She's a great Aussie rider that I've ridden with IRL before, and I can certainly tell you she's one of the more motivated riders that I've ever ridden with in the community. She's not one for the chat and the coffee. She's more one for breaking your legs off. So good on her. And this is technically a KOM, but let's take a look at it. I mean, it's 1%. Now it's 0%. I mean, it kicks up to 4. Anna, this isn't much of a climb. It's much more of a sprint, but regardless, 3-2-1 points on the line. Meredith Clark once again sticking it to them. A feather power up being used by Hans Joosten. She was also aggressive in this sprint when it was in reverse. But Preston coming over the top. The BRT rider has been absolutely on fire today. Good on her. BRT really sticking it to these bigger teams.
Yeah, BRT is absolutely trying to get these Z Sun riders. You just saw there a Z Sun rider was sitting in second. I think Sarah Ryan came through just in the last metre and passed her. We'll see what the points say, but this BRT team is absolutely motivated to move into the podium spot overall in third. And I think Z Sun need to worry about it because they're having a huge showing today with each of these intermediary sprints. And I can't see many Z Sun riders actually in this main pack. So looks like Ebert has been dropped. She's 7 seconds back now. Looks like there might just be one rider. You can see there on that green Tron representing, there we go. Ebert's been dropped off, so that's a little chase back just behind. I'm not sure if they'll get back on because that front group is drilling because those BRT riders, super motivated.
Well, they're the opportunities to really drill it. I mean, that's when you hurt legs, is when you don't just go for a sprint, but that you continue going and you almost use the sprint to be a bit of an attack rather than the finish line being that sprint line. So let's just do a quick recap of these bonus points. Erin Preston, you are rocking it, girl. BRT Devil Kittens on 9 points. That's dominant. Iris Hans Joosten from Zunderstruck. She's also been very good, particularly on those small little pinches up on the viaduct. Sarah Ryan, our resident triathlete in her aero helmet. Also a Devil Kitten on 4 points. Dana Davidson, she's picked up 3 points. I'd love to see where she's actually. We were talking about her getting dropped. Danette Shaw, another Zunderstruck rider on 3 points. Kath McKay sneaking in for 1 point, the Ace of Cakes rider. She has been very strong in weeks to come. Dana Davidson, oh, look, I gave her a bit of credit. I rate her very, very highly, but she's given up the goat, I think. She is just not happening. Kim Hurst is another one. It's just not their day. It happens, doesn't it, Anna? Sometimes you go out meaning everything to be good and it just does not happen.
I think the problem was she was just alone on that climb. She, as much as she would have tried on that downhill, she had a pack of, 15 in front of her. They would have been moving way too fast. As we can see with the men's screen on the right-hand side, looks like that was just the balloon sprint that they came through. But we'll have a look at the points and hopefully get a bit of a replay on that to see just who came through on that intermediary sprint, which I think, like I thought, is as decisive as I thought they would be tonight. Each sprint has dropped riders off the back, and looks like I've got a counter attack here from a ZWC rider. There's a lot of little internal, last time, do you remember in New York, Katie, we had all that chit chat going on with that rider breakaway of 3 where people were giving each other a bit of grief. I think this men's APAC division
was great.
is there's a
that
lot
was
of drama
great,
here.
wasn't
I'm
it? It was
loving
almost
it.
like a little bit of fisticuffs. They were a little bit cranky pants with each other. That's great. But I mean, I think you mentioned something before and you said that it's not that they're being paid. And I think sometimes the passion that runs so deep in these community leagues is actually a bigger motivator than any money could be. Let's just take a quick look at the bonus points. Kanji Stinger from Team ZWC Attack on 3 points. Ed Morgan, 3 points. Jacob Wilson, 3 points. So we've had a different winner in every intermediate sprint so far. In fact, we've had 9 different riders take out the 9 points opportunity. So Dylan Jones, 2 points. Canton Zaro on 2 points. And Zakiyama, he's our stolen rider, right? Can we call him that? On 2 points. Adam Ottstott, he's on 1 point. Anthony O'Connell on 1. Brian Duffy Jr. on 1. So relentless as they do, they've got 5 riders on points. I mean, that's their thing, right? They're not on the top of the table, but we feel like they should be because week after week they've been incredibly persistent and very consistent. Persistent and consistent. Try saying that 10 times.
Yeah.
And the rider that wasn't on there
was
Grosicki. There is somebody, a listener, come on, put that together for us, compose it.
I think what we're seeing here is, so last week we didn't see it, but the TTT actually had Relentless beat ZWC for the first time. So they beat them by 12 seconds, which isn't a lot. And what that means is now ZWC is sitting on 116, Relentless 114. So if Relentless can win today, which obviously they're going to try to do, they've got a great track record on these scratch races, is I think they may end up moving to that top of the table, because if they've got that time trial sorted, then they can keep getting points on ZWC.
Well, and then we've got race on, because we've only got a couple of weeks left here, especially with scratch races. I like that. I like a bit of excitement leading in to the back end, and it's coming into Christmas time. So we all need, and Thanksgiving, of course, for the Americans. But we are in APAC, so there's probably not too many people who are planning on cooking some turkeys, except in saying that, Brian Duffy Jr. is probably thinking about cooking a turkey over the weekend. It's possibly, Thanksgiving's possibly not over the weekend, so I'm sorry if I'm offending any Americans who are tuned in. Us Aussies don't really do that. I love seeing the chat on the right-hand side.
Us Aussies. Sorry, Katie. Us Aussies. What are you talking about?
Sorry.
No.
I apologize. You're what? Hold on, Anna. Let me just clear this up.
Oh, that's a bit.
Anything that New Zealand does well, Australia claims. I mean, Pavlova, let that be the best example there is. And Russell Crowe, I think that's another one.
Oh, man. Oh, no. You're never going to live that one down.
You can have Mel Gibson, though. You can have him back. Okay, so let's before I get myself in trouble here, let's go back to the racing. So we're nearly 22k in. For the men, it's 47k. So they're not even at the halfway mark. It's still a pretty big bunch, but it's whittled down considering there haven't been any major challenges other than intermediate sprints. I find that interesting in itself, because we thought that this would be fairly unchallenging and a fairly big bunch sprint, but the women's, that's quite a small bunch now. The men's is quite whittled down at the halfway mark. I mean, this could be playing out a little bit differently to how everybody expected it to. And they're going into
I think
your
so.
favourite part of the course, the guts, the intestines.
Les intestines. And I've just seen a message come through here from YouTube, so I'll just keep saying it. David here. So he's saying most of the ZWC riders are actually top elites from Japan. So they actually race elite in Japan with a lot of real life wins under their belt. So could be some good riders to watch. We can just see that popping up on screen. So an interesting little tidbit there. Keep an eye on those Japanese ZWC riders because obviously they know what they're doing.
Well, and I do urge any team managers listening to send us some info on your riders because let me tell you, you can Google search down some interesting rabbit holes when you're looking for some info on the riders. So please do send us any details on your teams. We love these facts. We love to know who's an IRL racer and who's a triathlete. But maybe better suited to crit racing. Brian Duffy Jr., I'm talking about you. Just for anybody. I'm the latest.
I feel like there's a weird fangirl thing going on here with you and with you and Brian Duffy, Katie. There's something going on here. I don't know what it is, but there's a lot of love there for Duffy.
There's like a 90210 flashback, and I can't ever remember what that Brian someone Junior's name was.
Oh,
but
Brian Austin Green.
That's the one. Oh, I was kind of close, wasn't I? All right. And once again, when I start to blush, I'll throw back to the racing because that's what's important, right? That's why we're here. So they're going through these S-Bends now. Now, we had a question early on, would the S-Bends challenge anything? And our opinion was perhaps it could. It hasn't really seemed to, though, has it? Hasn't played out like that.
No, and I think we saw that this morning just with the Hino team and the women's race this morning or earlier today, was they did a little attack through the S-Bends and they just they couldn't really make it stick. They could get a few seconds ahead, but people are so motivated at this point and they almost people kind of gather a bit of momentum around these corners because they're really pushing the pace out of them. So I don't think it's that easy to get away. Just also to our viewers out there who might be watching, I am interviewing Team Relentless tomorrow for the World of Zwift broadcast. So if you do have any questions for Relentless, their DS or Greg Grosicki, I think, is coming on, let us know. We'll fire off some questions at them, maybe about their sort of poaching strategies and how that's playing out for them.
Yeah, well, the coaching strategy is an interesting thing. I mean, in your experience out there racing, how much do you think the riders go by what is discussed beforehand, kind of the strategy versus what they're feeling and how it's playing out?
It's a really good question because I know for my team, we had a really set in stone strategy for the New York race and it got blown up within the first 3K. And the strategy for tomorrow is going to be, let's just see how it plays out and kind of go with how the race goes. So I could maybe tell you on the next one which one worked out better, but I think sometimes you've just got to go by who's doing what and have a look at what's around you. And I think, like I said earlier, you've just got to be so attentive this whole time. And we're already watching the women here. I mean, these guys are going to be really attentive as we see Sarah Ryan move to the front. They're only about just under 5K from finishing this race. They'll be getting nervous. They're out of those little sort of twists and corners over that little bridge a bit further back. They've got quite a big gap now to the group behind, 23 back. As we can see here, the bonus points, Erin Preston, like you've mentioned before, Katie, massive lead. But with Sarah Ryan, also from BRT, in second, and that Z-Sun rider in third. And that's really showing the name of today's race has been that battle between BRT and Z-Sun. Although, who do you think is going to take it out on the line? I've seen great stuff from Erin Preston, but, has she burnt the legs a bit too much? What do you think, Katie? Who's your pick for winning this women's race?
Look, Erin Preston's been super impressive so far. What we need to consider is that sometimes riders don't actually go for intermediate sprints so much as they kind of just sit in, let it roll, and go for the overall. Preston has clearly got very good legs, but she has burnt through quite a lot of matches so far. Ange McRae, I wish she had a little bit more acceleration than she does. She is improving week on week, though, so I never ever write her off. I mean, I think she's the biggest improver if you look at the last year, how far she's come. So she might be a bit of a sneaky, but it's really kind of hard to go past Garland, who I think has been really consistent, and also McKay. Um, Kath McKay, she does have a bit of speed in her legs. She knows how to follow a wheel, and week in and week out, she showed that she's got pretty good form. They'd be the riders that I would watch definitely. Um, in saying that, Reed has also Jen Reed, the Aero Flyer, has had a couple of
Mm.
really great performances. I don't think there's a standout favourite. I think that they all have an opportunity. What is interesting about this small group, because that's what it is. It's a small bunch. Is that they all have quite different characteristics when it comes to the final kilometres of a race. Uh, I think that they need to make sure they ride to their own strength, and not just roll it in and try and sprint for the last couple of hundred metres. Ange McRae is certainly one that I would say go long and go hard. Kath McKay is another one who I would think could have a really good result if she hit out pretty early. The last thing they want to do is let it become a bit of a cat and mouse slow
Mm.
affair coming into that final kilometre, because I just think that opens everybody up to danger. I mean, I wouldn't feel confident for any of the riders to really dominate in that way. So this will be a pretty interesting couple of K. So 47K in total. They're at 44.5. So that's only 2.5K to go. I know that there's a couple of attacks happening over in the men's race. Look at that on the split screen. Tanaka from ZWC. Look at that. They are strung out and working hard. Nearly 180 heart rate, over 400 watts. It is a tale of two different races if you look at those split screens. Of course, the women are
Yeah, and
heading
they
into the
are.
finish, but let's let's look at this replay here. Anna, ZWC and Relentless are the ones making the moves.
Oh, look at that. IKD, this is they're hitting that big climb here, 8%, and IKD is having a huge turn of pace there with an Evo rider, another Japanese rider right behind, and Grosicki, and then your man Duffy about 1 second back. So they're they're really pushing, but I think what happens here, which is what we just caught at the end, which I think we'll be able to catch, is Tanaka here just gets caught. I think he has a counter attack that happens, and this is, look at that strung out group of riders behind. You can't even see the riders right at the back of this group. So this has been a major effort from Tanaka. 7 watts per kg here. Around, you can see they're 390 up to, wow, that's almost hitting 400 watts. There we go, 400 up on the top of that climb. That was a massive, massive push from that ZWC rider.
And there's a lot of damage that has happened here. Look at this. And again, Anna, at the beginning, we predicted that perhaps this would be a bunch kick, that the course was not necessarily super exciting. But my goodness me, it has turned out to be quite a cracker so far. They've still got just under 20K left to go for the blokes, but they are certainly strung out. Sam Lindsay, where's he? He was brilliant in New York City. I want to see him come to the fore and make a bit of an effort. So we're coming into the final kilometre now. Anna, for the women, this is exciting. There's a small bunch of them. What a great effort they've made too. And I'm going to say this is a bit of a different bunch than we've seen in previous weeks come into a sprint finish together.
Yeah.
So a bit of unknown.
Yeah, I think looking at the numbers though, Sarah Ryan has the biggest watt output for a 15-second effort. So that's around 740 watts. That's just a little bit more than Davidson, who's been dropped off this pack. So this is going to be an interesting one. BRT highly motivated. Not many AHDRL riders. So they've had not a great showing today. My money is actually on Sarah Ryan. I think she, with that Aero helmet, she's here to do business. And small little pack. It's a really, really tricky finish as well. It sort of veers around to the left And then you see the little marker for the sprint, and then it has a sharp right-hander with only about 75 meters to go. And that makes it really hard to see actually where the sprint finishes. And I saw this earlier today with the Prem racing. It was sort of better to put in your power up and sprint effort just before that right-hander, but not too much before. A lot of people went too early when they saw the little green dashes on the side of the road. So we're just coming into that last little portion now. They'll sort of do a few little twists and turns. They're going to head under this bridge here, and it's a really, really hard run. And you can just see with the speeds these guys are going, they've really dropped that watt output now. It is going to be that cat and mouse. They're going to look around, and I think those with those high 15-second power outputs will just be hanging in here in the pack, just trying to pick the perfect time. Today, it is all about timing.
So we've talked about who is best suited based on power, but the one thing we don't know, Anna, is what power-ups they have. We know that can make a massive difference. Kim Garland, aero flies. She has been on fire the last weeks of racing. She makes the early move heading into the finish here, pushing over 185 beats per minute. She is flat chat, edging toward that 400
I think
watts.
it's too early.
But it's too early. Preston hasn't gone yet. She is biding her time. Mackay just sitting there. Hans Yosten, let's not write her off. We haven't seen her a lot in the earlier weeks, but she has been on fire in these intermediate sprints as well. This is an open bike race. There are those sprint dots that you talked about. Don't go too early. There's still a few hundred meters to go.
Here we go. They're going to go around a little turn. I think everyone's gone pretty early because they're going to come around this hard right-hander. That was way too early from Preston. So there you see that mistake. There's that right-hander. We could just see the aero rider coming through now. Clark with the truck power up, coming through to win it, just with Kath McKay in second. And it looks like Sarah Ryan from BRT, they're ringing for today. Coming in third, I do believe. We'll have a look at the replay and the final points, but I think that was it. So amazing little finish there. You just saw Preston went off a little too early, but there we go. So that opens up with Preston. She gets swamped here by Clark from Aero. Perfect time there around that bend with McKay just on her wheel, but it does look like McKay ended up in, I thought she was third, but she might have come second there with, was it Sarah Ryan or the Z-Sun rider? That's going to be a huge impact on points. I think that might have been the Z-Sun rider who came away with that. So that's devastating there for Ryan, who was so close, and they'll lose valuable points in that little battle.
That was a great ride by Hans Yosten. She has not been particularly active in the weeks to date, but what a good ride today. She showed herself, especially in those aqueduct intermediate sprints, but it was all about timing, just like it was in everything bagel. We talked about don't go too early, don't go too early, and I think that's what happened a bit. Erin Preston perhaps didn't realise quite how far it was into that finish line. Just goes to show how much course recon can really affect the overall outcome. So we're back to the men now, and this is a much smaller bunch, isn't it? All of a sudden, it is strung out, and the usual suspects, well, we think they'll be hiding in there somewhere, but it's a lot smaller than what we anticipated would be at this point. They've still got 15-odd kilometres left to go. Kenton Zaro, relentless. He's on his own. He needs to hustle to get back on, and he does just as we talk. Oddstott, also relentless. What happened with relentless? Why do we keep seeing their riders chasing back on? This is really a rough race. Look at this. Gaps are opening up everywhere.
Yeah, so this is ZWC who's just pushing this pace. We saw them doing that 1-2 at the top of the reverse Petite Co-M, and now they're just pushing off the front again. I do want to just note a few of the comments we're having coming through in our YouTube chat. So there is a shout out to Jacob Wilson. So he's the manager of Relentless. He organises all the crew racing today and is also there adding up all their points manually so we can let them know on Discord. He's a great leader, and he gets up pretty early in the morning as well. So a lot of those Relentless guys up at about 2:45 a.m. to race. We've got Evo Savages with a great turnout today, apparently from Japan, Australia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Singapore. So a great little turnout from those riders. And also, 2:45 a.m. that all the Relentless riders are getting up to race today. So that's commitment to the cause.
It is. It is. I mean, to see when I was talking so flippantly about Thanksgiving, I kind of forgot for a moment that we may have some committed riders on the other side of the planet getting up at all hours to race this league. But that is pretty cool, isn't it? That if you are motivated to do so, you absolutely can. And it is absolutely split to pieces. And this is something that, okay, so let me just backtrack for a second here, Anna, because NYC Everything Bagel, we knew it would be blown to pieces. And it was especially thanks to Lindsay. He blew everything to pieces on that first climb. We expected that. This, do you think that perhaps they've essentially caught them napping? That a lot of the riders might have thought this will be a bit of a shoe-in, won't be too bad, and that's what's brought them undone? Because there's literally riders split all across the French countryside.
Yeah, I mean, they're just approaching the Aqueduct KOM here. So this is that short sort of sprint one. So we'll chat a bit about what, my thoughts about what I think's happened. But as you see, can't quite see that name. A great British rider coming through off the front of that pink Tron. He'll just get passed here by the bunch. A few feathers being dropped. Relentless rider moving off to the front. They've been very dominant in some of these sprints as he's coming through, but it looks like another ZWC rider. Wow, with those aero helmets, they're looking really good. And whoa, who is that? They've just come out of absolutely they've been shot out of a rocket. That was Rich there from ZWC. That was some absolutely phenomenal sprinting. Wow, I didn't even see him coming. So this is a ZWC versus Relentless showdown in the men's race today. You can just see, I didn't even see Mitch there. It's about 4 riders back, and you just see him appear right there. He just puts in a huge turn of pace, and that is absolutely blowing apart. And he's got that disc wheel, so he's obviously after all the sprint points. So good that he managed to stay up with this lead pack on the climb with that heavier disc wheel. But as you were saying, Katie, before that intermediary, what I think's happened is ZWC has had maybe a little bee in their bonnet before today's race, and they've come in with a game plan. I don't think they would have liked getting beaten in the team time trial last week, and they've got a lot of climbers. So I have heard just coming through on some of the chats that ZWC is a team full of climbers, and I think they've used that to their advantage, and they've pushed that KOM earlier on, where there were no points on the top, but they've used it to whittle down this pack to what we're seeing here, which is, 18 to 20 riders.
Yeah, Monrich was pretty good in Everything Bagel, I must say. He impressed me. He had a few accelerations that showed that he was motivated, and he did have a little bit of horsepower. I think a lot of the riders, it's been a bit of a learning experience for themselves. They've kind of been figuring out what they're best at. And as you know, having done a criterium on the weekend, you Zwift legending triathlete, it's a bit of a difference. I think that there'd be a lot of the riders who are IRL racers and who are really finding their feet in the Zwift world. So we're coming into another sprint here for the men. They come pretty thick and fast, don't they? I mean, that's another consideration. You really cannot nap for a second. Grasicki, your man, he's on the move. IKD, these are riders we've seen really impressive over the last couple of weeks. But hello, acceleration with a power up. That was
that Monrich again?
Very impressive. I think
wow.
it was. I think it was.
It was Monrich.
Let's take a look at the points when we can. But yeah, he's got a bit of motivation going, doesn't he?
He's got an unreal turn of pace. I wonder what his 5-second power is, because he just tends to look like he gets shot out of a rocket right in front of everyone. He's not even out of the saddle there. He's just come through with that drafting power up right past Grosicki on the line.
Yeah, that's really impressive riding from Rich. And just as we were talking about him, the acceleration is what impresses me. Yes, he's got the power up. Yes, that drafting boost makes a bit of a difference. Does it allow him to accelerate past in that regard on its own? No, it doesn't. That comes from absolute horsepower and a big set of lungs. So let's just take a look at that setting overall. Mon Rich, go Aussie, go. Team ZWC attack on 6 points. That is double. That's impressive. Kanji Stinger, that's a great name for a bike rider, on 3 points. Ed Morgan also on 3 points. Jacob Wilson, Relentless on 3 points. Dylan Jones, Smoother Zed's son on 2. Greg Grosicki, Relentless on 2. Rin Watanabe on 2 points. Canton Zaro on 2 points. Zaki Yama on 2 points. And Otstot on 1 point. We've got a very thick representation from Relentless there, and that's very impressive. It's interesting because a minute ago, Anna, we were discussing the fact that we keep seeing their riders off the back and bridging back on. Perhaps the reason that's happening is because they're burning a lot of matches in those intermediate sprints and then having to jump back on. Oh, look at this, a bit of slam being thrown down. Why are you not working?
Whoa. Look at this. There's a group right behind this pack here that's not that far off. So you can just see there's been an attack off the front here by ZWC again. So not only is Monrich coming through and taking all these sprint points, and I will just say his raw power is unreal. So he rides up above the 14 watt per kg in his sprint. So we really need 15.8 watts per kg, which is higher than any other rider out there. It's huge. So these guys do not want him at the finish because he will outsprint everybody. I will say right now, hands down, if he's in that group, he's my pick. He will outsprint everybody in this group.
Yeah, it's really impressive tactics. And something we've seen over the weeks, I would easily say, is week 1, I enjoyed the racing, Anna. We enjoyed commentating it. We said, geez, these women, these blokes, they're racing really well. But as it's evolved, we've seen a real dynamic come out. We've seen a lot of very clear team tactics. We've seen a lot of individuals really shine. But more than that, we've seen quite a depth of talent across this community racing. That's fabulous. And I really, really appreciate the fact that these teams, especially some of them that are lower in the overall team rankings, aren't just giving up the goat and walking away from it. You know, they are still throwing down the gauntlet. A good attack here. It's a pretty tough spot to stay away. He's got 5 seconds. Umichu from Evo, the Japanese rider. Good representation from Japan. So well done to them, having so many riders on the start line. But it's a pretty hot chase from the back of the pack. But it is, again, it's a smaller bunch again. Every time we go through a sprint, we managed to lose quite a few riders. Sam Lindsay, he's sitting in there. We haven't seen him hit the win today. That's pretty smart riding.
Yeah, it's this strategy they've got playing out. This is very similar to what happened in the men's Prem division, actually. There was a big breakaway after that last sprint heading into the finish line, and someone got up to around, I think it was sort of like 8 seconds, and you just wondered how long they were going to leave him out there. And looks like they're going to pull in this Evo rider, but I will just mention there is a little bit of a battle going on between Evo and Aero. So they're only 4 points apart. So Evo is probably motivated to get as many points as they can just to start to overtake Aero, and I don't see many Aero riders represented in this front pack. So we can just see Amichu from Evo riding at a pretty good watts, but he's been chased down and just caught here by the rest of the pack. So they'll all come together, and I think it's going to be worrying for them because they've got some big hitters in that Monrich who can beat them? Those 2 last sprints have been absolutely unreal to watch. So we do see a little bit of chit-chat going on here from the chase group. So, you know, they're not really working cohesively. You can see people asking, you know, are you going to work? What's going on? We've got a relentless rider at the back. He doesn't have to do anything. He's got relentless riders in the front pack. So, yeah, no one here is really going to be working. It looks like a bunch of D-pack riders, actually. So they're probably just getting frustrated, but I don't think they will catch on, unfortunately.
Oh, look at this. Fair play for the shout-out. Well-deserved for Jacob, the Relentless Wilson. I love a good nickname. If anybody... Oh, look at that. Brian Duffy and Jacob.
There we go, Katie.
Also very handsome. Yes. Oh, that's one for the ladies, isn't it? Single and ready to mingle.
And ready to mingle.
Heavens.
Wow. Well,
look, I'm not single and ready to mingle, but good for Brian Duffy Jr.
Fantastic. Duffy, just wait for your Tinder to light up after tonight's race. So that is a great little shout out.
Shout out to anybody looking for a well-credentialed gentleman who's a triathlete and potentially a very good crit rider. There you go. Put that on your Tinder profile. All right, look at this. This is
does the handsomeness make him a faster sprinter? That's the question.
Look,
we're coming into the final kilometres here.
My favourite part about this at all, Anna, is our producer in the background, Nathan. I think he's probably blushing and a little bit horrified at the fact that we're talking about Tinder on a live stream. But that is what you get, Nathan, when you put that up on screen. So fair warning to you. So let's go back to the bike racing, which is why we're all here. And Rich from ZWC, is he at the front, Anna? This is your bloke.
Yeah,
you
Katie,
reckon
tell me, why
that he can win in a
attacking?
sprint?
Why would he attack this if he's got huge numbers behind him? Give me a feeling here. I would be confused.
The only reason you would do this is because you feel really good, and there comes, let's not say arrogance, because I feel like that has a very negative connotation, and I don't mean that at all. Confidence. Let's go for confidence. When you are just feeling really good and you move with everything and it's not a huge effort. And I think based on the effort we've seen from Rich today, he's just got really good legs. And often in the Zwift world, a bit more than in the IRL world, I would say, having really good legs translates to an entire race versus having really good sprint legs, but it being a 200K 6-hour race where you might not be fresh at the end. And we've seen this in the women, we've seen this in the men, that when riders are on, they're on. And I think today, Rich is on. And he's working hard, and he thinks that this is a good opportunity. Grasicki jumping across. This says to me, Anna, that they're worried.
Oh, that was a little fake effort, though. Something's up with Grosicki's power. Are you seeing that? It's going up to like 7, and then it dropped down to 2, and then it went back up to 7, and then now it's at 10, and then it's just kind of jumping all over the show. I think he might have a few technicals, Greg, today. I think that's why we saw him dropping off the back earlier. But this is a danger time, especially if the relentless rider, one of their top riders is having a few issues out there. That's like almost having a sort of a flat tire right at the end here. But we've got a Z Sun rider really pushing the pace with Mon Rich. He's got such good numbers. Maybe he doesn't know that it would have been probably more worth it to just stay at the back of that pack and push through at the end. But there's Sam Lindsay as well. We're just watching him, 382. 173 beats a minute. These guys are like not messing around. Not long to go till the end as well. Just under 2K, I do believe. So this is Monrich has just been caught now. So what would he do now? He's burned a few matches. You'd have to say he'd hide in the pack and really just unleash at the end.
Yeah, I mean, you'd like to think that good legs don't lead to overconfidence because, that's when you get Alaphilippe saluting in his rainbow stripes and not actually winning, and that is not a good day on the bike. So I hope Monrich just takes a bit of a breather here because we know that he does have pretty good legs. Sam Lindsay, he's an interesting one. He's a bit of a wild card, I reckon, because he was brilliant in NYC Everything Bagel. He was very, very strong on the climbs, but that doesn't discount him from having certainly a late attack on this kind of course. And something we also saw in the women's was that you cannot go too early. If you turn that into perhaps a tactic for a non-sprinter, that's an opportunity to go quite early because for the sprinters, it is quite a difficult run-in if they do go too much. Now, Rich is right on the back here. Hopefully, he's just taking a bit of a breather. If I see that gap open up at all, I'll get pretty nervous for him, but I think he's doing a pretty good job so far. And he'd certainly be a wheel that I would be hunting for coming into a sprint finish.
Look at that setup that Monrich has got as well. He's sitting at the back now. He has got the perfect setup for sprinting. That Specialized Venge S-Works with the Superfly zip wheel. That's like, he's got to be a very high level Zwifter to get that. I haven't even got that. I think it's like 39 plus or something. So don't know about the facial hair though. That's got to slow you down. But I think he's playing this pretty well now. He's just sitting in the back. Like you said, he probably had the confidence to go, maybe thought there was going to be a breakaway. That almost tells me as well that he is definitely all in for the win. Maybe he thought that breakaway could get away, so he followed it, but now he's like, yep, I'm all in for the sprint. Let's go. Not long to go. They're just going to cross over a few of these sort of twists and turns, and then head into that main little town like we saw in the women's race. And I'll stake a claim on it now. Those disc wheels are going to win today. So whoever have got those disc wheels, we saw Mon Rich with one. There's a few other riders in there. The disc wheel will win out in the sprint today for sure.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, bike choice really comes very heavily into play at this point. We've had a question about what is a high heart rate. Anything over 170, you have to assume is pretty top end. For the most part, these athletes, their heart rate normal would be, and there it is from Cadell. Cadell Howie, a bit of a shout out to the Aussie champion, of course, Cadell Evans. Good on you, mate. Would be anything, I would say, Anna, from 170 to 190 would be the normal maximums for most of these riders. So if you see it pushing up towards that, you know that they're really at the top end. We also had a great comment about it possibly not being pronounced Jacob, given the spelling of Jakob. So sorry if it's Jakob. That's a bit of an Aussie twang in there. Yeah, for Jakob, not Jacob. But, you know, there's not really too many names that Aussies don't like to Aussiefy if we get the chance. So we're coming into the finish. There's not too long to go. It's all about the timing here. We saw with the bridge here, Anna, the women went at this point. It was too early. When they hit that sprint line, it's still too early.
Yeah, so they're going to come around through this little cityscape, and I think the problem is you just get so nervous and you can't see the finish because of that tight right-hander. So like we saw in the women's, like you said, so many people went early, and I think it is just you're freaking out a bit. You know, you're coming around, you can't see. You're like, when's that turn coming up? Oh, I'll just drop my power up now, and before you know it, you've been swamped at the finish line. So these guys now sort of just rounding a few of these little right-hand bends here, then it'll go nice and straight for a while, but they still won't see the finish line until they round that more harder of a turn with about 75 meters to go. So you'll see the little green lines on the side of the road on the right hand side, and that's where quite a few would think to drop a power up. I think maybe just wait sort of 50 meters beyond that, do drop it, you know, a little bit before the corner, and then just all in. But you can see here we've got all the big players. You can see Grosicki, a lot of ZWC riders who are set up full aero helmet, full disc wheels. They're in the black and white stripes. We've got Hashimoto from ZWC just moving off the front, and we've seen a few attacks coming here from the back. There's that feather that I talked about. If you drop the feather and you put in a huge turn of effort, that's Mon Rich. You can get a massive gap on the group, which is exactly what he's done. Now, he may make me eat my words by saying it's not good to go early because he could stay away with the power he has as he pushes up to 11 watts per kg. He was up around 14. He's got a huge gap, but look at the tarmac. He's got to cross before he takes that right-hander with about 75 meters to go, and he's going to get swamped, as we saw, way too early. We've got Yama, the pickup from Relentless, but he has been passed there by Stinger. Amazing riding from Stinger. And then we might have to have a little finisher there. It might have been Wilkie coming through in second, but Stinger, that name you liked earlier, Katie, he has put a show on for ZWC.
Well, quite a stinger he has. Mon Rich, he nearly had it. We thought he could pull this off, especially with the dropping of that power up. Just goes to show you cannot go too early. He got swallowed up by that chasing bunch. Yama, he was on the move, but Stinger, the acceleration without the power up is what really impresses me. That just comes from absolute pure power. Relentless, good on you for bringing Days of Our Lives into the Zwift racing for us to commentate on, because it has paid off. Yama for the win there. Anna, that was pretty convincing, pretty impressive. Well, it's a bit of a photo finish, and look at all those. And to just validate your bike choice, Anna, disc wheel for the win won. With Yama.
Yep.
And look at the Tron bikes trailing
all
behind.
Chasing up behind.
So,
but look
at
that
anybody who
there,
thinks
Katie.
It doesn't make too much difference, well, I don't know. This is a
huge difference. Look at that.
Yeah.
Massive. That group behind, there's like 6 riders all within like 2 meters? That's insane. That is An absolutely crazy finish.
Well, and I almost feel as though perhaps some of the riders in that final sprint finish, Anna, didn't really rate themselves. They saw Rich go early. They thought this is all over Red Rover. And then all of a sudden, they're there. They're in contention. They're amongst the finishers. That was a bit of an unusual sprint. I mean, for the women as well.
It's a I mean, I watched the prems earlier today. I've watched these ones. I just don't think there's like a very easy way to pick this at all. 75 meters, you take a sharp right and you can't even see the finish. So you just don't know when to drop it. I think I want to say, it's talent, but I think a huge part of it is luck and just really, really good timing.
And I think power ups really come into play. So, you know, the power ups were designed to give the feeling of the in real life things that could happen and all of the elements that change the racing. I think they actually do a pretty good job. And I think as we discussed quite a lot back and forth, which power up is the best, when to use it. I mean, I'm going to go back and take a look at those numbers because I think Rich, with that power up drop, I think he did a really good job of the acceleration and the sprint execution, but he kind of did it a little bit too early. He went too early. I
Yeah.
feel, I wanted to yell at him, not yet, not yet, not yet. But
Yeah, yeah.
again, once you've committed, once you've dropped that power up, that's it. You've just got to commit. And it was a bit too early. We're going to go back and just take a look now. The B men are coming in. And do you think they're going to make the same mistake? Don't go too well. Big bunch here. This is a great group of the B riders here. And Tune Bike works. Tyso, he's sitting nice and comfortably in. They're clipping along again. This bridge is a big landmark. I think a lot of the riders feel like when they come under that bridge that this is the time that the sprint starts, but that is too early.
Yeah, too early. And they sort of they do hit this sort of a little bit of a right hand bend and then they go into a big long straight. And I think what happens is they think when they hit the straight that that's the time to start sprinting as we see someone moving off the front here. And yeah, like we saw, in both races, it's just it's all about timing. I believe maybe you see the corner. As soon as you see the corner, I'd drop it and just go for it from that point on. But yeah, it's really tricky. They go through these twists and turns. Here's that bridge coming up you talked about, Katie, as we see a feather being dropped here by Tyso from Tune Bike Works. Very, very early attack and really not pushing up the watts too high. So just around 5 watts. So that was an interesting little maneuver. Didn't really manage to get away, but there's been a 1-2 now with an AHDR blowfly off the front at 12 watts per kg. That is almost exactly what has happened, what we've seen with Monrich, with the feather power up, going early. What's going to happen? Do you think they're going to get swamped again?
Oh, this is a big move by Evans. Look at that heart rate. That's a bit higher than the old average normal high heart rate, pushing toward 200. He's leaving it all out there. I think he's gone too early. He only just passed that sprint line. And look at that bunch racing towards him. Evans, he had a strong start. He's getting swallowed up by this chasing pack. And it is North Endurance. That's Paula from Cryogen. He's accelerating, but he too gets swallowed up. Gee, you just can't go too early here, can you? DM from Aero CT taking the win there ahead of JB from Vision. Vision, good ride by them. They've been really solid the last couple of weeks. But wasn't that just another example, Anna, of go too early and you pay the price?
Exactly, but as we're seeing this happen, I have actually heard that the early attack by Monrich, as we just watched here with the B rider coming through Aero, that was a great little use of an Aero power up with the Vision rider just behind them. They actually gapped it, so there was a bit of a gap between those two in third place with Vision, looks like a Velo Club rider in third. But just going back to a little bit of inside knowledge I just got, which was it was a strategy to put Monrich off on an early attack. So he went early to draw out the sprinters from the pack, and it was always their intention to have Stinger come through from the same team and come through the pack and use his drafting power up for the win. So great team play there from ZWC. And what we wondered what Monrich was doing, well, there we go. It's working for the team.
Well, strategy for the team. I mean, absolutely for the win. They did a great job of that. But talk about a long strategy. I mean, was that the point of using him up in intermediate sprints to make everybody think that he was on the form and going for the finish, like a real dummy play, because that was brilliant. I mean, if that's what they did, if they set that up from the very beginning, I love it. I love it. It's actually the best tactics I've seen so far. It's a little bit sneaky. It's a little bit clever. I mean, it's a little bit of both. It's great. Good on them. I mean,
I love it.
I think we can probably learn from that, can't we?
I think what they're doing is they're coming into the race with a whole suitcase full of different strategies. And then as the race plays out, they go, okay, we'll do, a few little attacks on the climb, then we'll see what happens. Okay, we've got a little bit of a group like this. Okay, these riders have probably got a DS, looking at these other power numbers. It's getting this serious now in the community league, especially this APAC racing. This is getting, big time. And they're sitting there with their team manager and their DS, and they're working it out. They're doing the numbers, and then you see what happens. They've got a perfectly executed strategy at the end, and they take the win.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it really is heating up, and I think week after week, it just keeps getting better. And that goes for the women as well as for the men. The women's racing, we've seen a lot of riders on an individual level really improve week on week. But strategically and within the teams, we've seen that dynamic play out. It's been quite good racing. Let's see if we can take a look now at the charts for today, the results charts. So let's take a look at the women. Meredith Clark, she rode very, very well today. She took the win ahead of Iris Hans-Josten, who also had a very good ride, taking a lot of intermediate points. Kath McKay in third. Your girl, the triathlete Sarah Ryan, with the Aero helmet in fourth. Great riding from her. In fifth was Erin Preston, and she had a great race as well, taking a lot of the intermediate sprints, but that early acceleration in the final sprint got her. Jen Reid in sixth. Ange McRae, that is my girl. I've seen her improve week on week through this series. Very impressive. In seventh, Sky Talbot in eighth. Kim Garland coming in ninth, and in 10th place, we've got Lam Kong. 45 seconds back. So we've got a nine strong front group there. The Div C, Anna?
Got Mel Similinars. She won it in a shorter race. I was thinking, whoa, that's a smoking time. Aoife Reid in second, Courtney Wheeler third, Lucy Esdale in fourth, Tracy Williams from the UK, early start for her, I think, in fifth, Janine P in sixth, Beck Covington in seventh, Mandy in eighth, Amanda Berendt in ninth, and Charlotte Lang in 10th. 30 seconds back, so a little bit of a break out the front.
So in the overall, the AHDRL Ace of Cakes, they maintain their lead on 137 points. Only 5 points in it to the Aero Flyers on 132. Z Sunderstruck on 124 points. But here is the race. Only 2 points adrift on 122 are the BRT Devil Kittens. The next couple of weeks will be really interesting to see how that plays out. We've got AHDRL Bombshells and the Fluffy Buns in fifth and sixth, respectively. The BRT Hellfire Kittens in seventh, Cryogen Valletta in eighth, and Power in ninth. But we're not sure they're really out there, but they're certainly entered and may come back. The Div C, Anna?
Oh, look at that. Equal on points at the top. AHDRL, We Ate the Cake, and TBR Smile on both on 134. That is going to be interesting with BRT Fiery Kittens 131. Wow, top three there. AHDRL Caffeines in fourth, the Comets in fifth, the Spin Mafia in sixth, the Cruzettes in seventh, Evo Flux in eighth, Queen Bees in ninth, and Herd of Echidnas in 10th.
That is a tight table for sure. Let's take a look at the men's. And of course, it was Stinger who took the win. What a great sprint ahead of Peter Wilkie. Didn't he hide well all day? In second, Zaki Yama in third, Fabian Devola in fourth, TIKD in fifth, Will Golding in sixth, Brian Duffy Jr. in seventh, Greg Grasicki in eighth, Rin Watanabe in ninth, and Yuki Tanaka took out the top 10. So let's look at Div B, because this was a good finish. Anna, Dylan McLean took the win.
Yeah, Dylan McLean in first, Jay Bester coming in second. Look how tight that is. And Nick in third, Paul Martin in fourth, Tyso in fifth, Andrew Gannon in sixth, with Andrew Fuigner right on his heels in 7th, Matt Hargraves in 8th, Dave Hogan 9th, and rounding it out, Beanstalk. Love that rider, top 10.
All right, the Div C, they've also finished. Rob Blue took the win ahead of Gustav Ruttersvoort in 2nd, Gary Gaffel in 3rd, Andrew Bain took 4th, Shane Smead in 5th, Ali Wright in 6th, Andy Kite in 7th, Nick Tippett in 8th, Jim Peachy took out 9th, Dave Otto rounded out the top 10 and a fairly tight finish in the Division C. They came to finish in a nice bunch there. So let's just take a look at the league standings. So at the top of the table for Div A, we've got Team ZWC Attack on 136 points. Only 3 points adrift, Relentless. This is a tight bike race. DPAC not out of contention on 127. So those top 3, this is a race. In 4th, we've got the Evo Savages, the Aero Masters in 5th, Wes number 2 in 6th, Team ZWC Blast in 7th, WTRL Pioneers in 8th, TBR 54T in 9th on 69 points, and in 10th, Phoenix Cycling Collective.
And in the Division 1B, we've got TBR 50T, 134, very closely followed by Aero Force at 132. That battle's not over. Evo Barbarians back in 3rd with 123, Cryogen Etna in 4th, AHDR Blowflies in 5th, Dirty Sprockets in 6th, Vision APAC in 7th, ZHQ Ravens in 8th, Z Sundries in 9th, and Velo Club coming through in 10th.
So Div C, we've got the AHDR Chances on 134 points, only 3 points in front of TBR 46T, so the race is on there. TTI Carbos in 3rd, 123. In 4th, Cryogen LT in 114. And another tight race here, tied at 114 with AHDR Choppers. MRRC in 6th on 92 points. Cryogen Alto de Latras on 91 points. Also on 91 points is TBR 47T. AHDR Chargers in 9th on 81 points. Cryogen Mount Hotham on 63 points in 10th place. So Anna, it has been a pretty good week of racing again. And I've got to say, this sets it up for a couple of really exciting weeks to come, because a lot of those leaderboards from A through to the C div, they're pretty tight.
Yeah, they're really tight, both across the men's and the women's. Like that, I'm really looking forward to the Relentless ZWC, and I'm really looking forward to the Z Sun and BRT in the women's field. So we've got some epic races ahead. The team time trial next week, round Watopia again, so that's going to be epic. Love seeing those TTTs and see who can mix things up a bit.
Absolutely. Well, you know, the other thing that is very exciting is coming up is the first ever Esports World Championships from the UCI, and that will take place on the 9th of December. But before that, I urge everybody to join us for the Zwift Nations Challenge at WTRL. So if you head to WTRL.racing, you'll be able to find some details on that. It happens on December the 5th and the 6th, and that will be 2 races for each country that is eligible. So whatever country you are registered for, make sure you look up the events that correspond with that. Otherwise, your effort is completely wasted. All of the races will go into essentially the time bucket to see who is the best ranked nation. Essentially, Anna, it's a giant team's time trial for anybody who decides to jump in. So in Australia, it's about 11 a.m. on the Saturday and the Sunday, the 5th and 6th of December. There's 22 countries that are at the top of the Zwift subscription table, and they will be the ones that are competing. So let's take a little look at the video. And Anna, thank you very much for joining us. And we will see you next week. Team's time trial, the racing is on.
See you next time.
you.